Hey, everybody. Welcome to RiverCity-Media's coverage of the Northeast Alabama Community College softball team. Howard Channing along with Phil Harris and Coach Joe Guthrie. Sorry about not having a countdown tonight, but some of the stuff got moved around and I'm not technology sound, so I have no idea where it's at. So anyway, Coach, thanks for joining us and, uh, coming off this long road trip over the weekend and everything. We appreciate your time. And it looks like you're a little bit wore out and wear and tear as well.
Oh yeah. It was we appreciate, Jimmy Colitis, our AD, and, Dr. Campbell, our president, allowing us to do something like this. I mean, we've had probably as challenging as anybody has in junior college softball of a road trip. And I think the last time we visited you guys, we had played that first game at Marion. I can't remember if we played the second one in that week going to their place. And we had a good, on that one, that was our first road game down there, and we played real well and won a couple games there. Then we went over to Mississippi State and played Etowamba, who's had a good team in the past, had another good team this year. We were able to win that game, and then played Mississippi State. And when they got to the top of the seven, it was 2-0. So we're pretty happy with that result. They're obviously a good team, just a couple years removed from a super regional and a regional last year. So we're pleased with that. And then, this last week was probably as challenging a week as we're going to have, but we've got some more challenging weeks in front of us, including this one. We went down to Troy on a Wednesday. After 7 innings, it was, 3-1 on their way, against them. And that's a good team, wins 30 plus games every year. And we went down to McNeese and, that got it handed to us, in that game. Another really good team. Really, other than the first and the last innings that we played, we were pretty good. We just had a couple innings that weren't good, didn't start well, made some uncharacteristic mental mistakes. But we responded very, very well, against Louisiana Tech, 10-inning game there yesterday and won that one 11-8. So, really good competition. It's going to make our kids better. I know all the programs were, pretty complimentary of our players and our team. Particularly proud of the effort of our team yesterday, responding to adversity because, we started on Friday. We practiced actually on Friday at our place, drove from Rainsville to Lake Charles, which is a long way. Got up the next morning, had an 11-inning game. Didn't respond great to that adversity, but drove from Ruston, Saturday after that game ended, spent the night there, played very well yesterday, and then drove home. So I'm proud of our team. I think we've got a chance to, be pretty special. But lessons like that are hard to get when you're just playing, the local team down the street or each other. So I'm real pleased with what we were doing in terms of sticking to the process and being able to handle adversity and getting better. So, hats off to those guys for this week for sure.
Coach, we know that you have a big turnout all the time at home, but on these away games, do the other teams have a pretty good turnout with it being the fall season?
Yeah, I thought, Troy was in the middle of their, South Alabama football week. That's always going to kind of get the campus a little lively. Good atmosphere there. McNeese and Tech are always I've been there many times over the years. They're always going to be, some fans there that are passionate about what they do. Tech in particular has one of the finest facilities in the country. So that was good. It wasn't jam packed, but we had people there. It was definitely not, your average run of the mill, just kind of, college atmosphere. I thought our people traveled well. We had a lot of, parents and fans and, loved ones and people that were watching us. So that was cool to see. It's a long way to go. We've got a kid from Louisiana on our roster, and it was good to see her get to play in front of her family in Skylar Branch. And then, we've got a couple of Texas kids with Briley Weber and, Ileana Flores that are also, from Houston. So it was good for those guys, to get their families were able to come see them. So all those were, that's partly why we do it. And that, that was good to see, but very good atmospheres we were in. And I think that'll only, prepare us as we go down the road for sure.
That's great to. That's kind of going to be my next question. The following of the Northeast fans, how do they turn out? But it sounds like you're very pleased with the turnouts at all the locations with the Northeast people.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to generate some interest. I have a lot of recruits that, have hit me up directly or, on social media. And, when you're playing these games and you're either competing very closely with, SEC and very good mid-major competition, I think every team that we played, Division I wise is a top 50 team. They've proven that, perennially, and to be there and hanging in with them, and in the case of the other day, playing a really good game and coming out on top, those things are good for us. Because these are not teams that, we intentionally play teams that we feel like, are providing challenging environments and getting players better. And, after they leave us, we want to try to provide that same opportunity for our players as they move on. And we, I definitely wasn't disappointed with that for sure.
Last question come to you, Phil. With everything going on, all the travels and all that, you kind of told us before we went on there, but go ahead and let everybody know you kind of giving the girls a break from you, not necessarily softball, but a break from you.
Yeah, well, they're getting both. We told them, some of them came in today to turn in. We've got a really good setup with laundry. They had to turn in some of their jerseys. We've got some managers and coaches pitch in, to clean those up for them in our facilities. So they came in and did that. So I saw a few of them in the facility this morning. But we told them today specifically, no softball after the grind of that road trip. We'll do some light stuff tomorrow, but it's all voluntary. And then Wednesday we'll kind of crawl back in it. So we've got another really tough series this weekend at Sanford. Another team that is a mid-major team that's a 30-plus win team that I think finished third in the SoCon last year. So good team. I think they're on the rise. Their pitching coach is an ex-player of ours at UAB, Sarah Cespedes, who's done a really good job there. So we're excited about that, and we're kind of trying to sprint toward the finish line here because fall will be over very quickly. So we're excited.
I feel.
Well, Coach, I wonder if this kind of sort of holds true. When you make a long trip like this and these young ladies spend several days together and then you spend a lot of time with them, do you feel like together, coaching staff, players now get a little bit closer, get a little more comfortable with each other, and it makes them more coachable?
Yeah, I think so. We told them in the week leading up to this week that things are going to be hard. It's a tough environment we're in at Mississippi State. I thought we handled that well, but it's not nearly the road trip. And when we came out and went into practice this week, our big thing was we've been preaching, in our team meetings, and as we've read through, our book, The Twin Thieves, that we're going on, that has a lot to do with culture building, staying process oriented. One of the things we talked about was the fact that we're going to be tired, the fact that being around one another, you have a tendency to get sick of somebody. You may not use your words or your actions great because the fatigue sets in. We wanted to be mindful of that. I thought they did a really good job of that. Because it's especially when things don't go your way in the first game, it's real easy to just kind of get emotional because you are very tired. But we handled that well. We bounced back well. I think these kids, have the values that we're looking for to be champions, and we have a long way to go. But I think that starts with how you're treating people, and they've done a really good job of that. We hope that we're echoing that back with them. So I think that all that is positive, and I enjoyed being around them. The fact that they all wanted to have a get together today to celebrate a teammate's birthday on their own after being in a bus for I don't know how many hours. The last 3 days, I think that shows a lot about what our team is doing, and I don't take a lot of credit for that. I think that speaks a lot to the type of kids that we have here, and and what we're building for sure.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, Coach, tell me this. I know you probably talk with a lot of coaches from other staffs because naturally you're playing these teams that you're familiar with. Are you getting some positive feedback from other schools about your team?
We are. Every place we've been, we had a call in from, Troy today. They want to make sure that they're following us. They've got a list of names from, from playing us that, they're hot on. We had similar information from the other teams we played at McNeese and Louisiana Tech. And, that's going to be a good circle for us. If you're going to come here, you're going to play in front of that kind of competition. You're going to get better. And you're going to move on as long as you continue to improve and do the things to create value for yourself and in this program. So all of that is good for us. It very much helps us that we've been very competitive in these games and even won a game. People will say, well, it's just a fall, but I know we're not trying to lose. I'm absolutely positive they're not trying to lose in those games. Yes, there are some developments. We're playing everybody. Everybody on our team did something on this trip. So, all those are good, but you're still playing against the team. And it's a little different than it is in the spring, but you're still playing to win the game. So I think that, it says a lot to our team, what we've been able to do. And, early on, it gives you some, some good feelings about where we need to go forward. And, it allows us to set some high expectations because, we need to raise our game continually every week because I think that's what we're capable of doing and continue to work and not just be satisfied with this. It's a good, we've had a good start. We're going to have to be mindful of complacency going forward because that you have a tendency to do that after doing some things that we've done in the last couple of weeks. But, we haven't won anything. The fall doesn't count. But I think that we're definitely off to a good start.
Phil, do you mind if I ask a quick question?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Talking about the other teams wanting to follow y'all and all that, are they allowed to speak with your players right now?
Yeah, it's pretty open in junior college. That we're considered kind of what in the NCAA language is a scholastic event, not a travel ball type of event. So, be that as it may, they can see us when they want to. It doesn't really count as much against their recruiting calendar as it does under some certain other parameters. And then pretty much, we can contact their players and they can contact ours. It's fairly wide open, in junior college. And, the reason for that largely is because, JC has always kind of been a turnstile type operation. So it allows players both that are going to go toward, the 4-year school or a bounce back, from to a 4 to 4, that open communication line. And that's been the case as long as I can remember. So, that allows some freedom to communicate and, helps us gauge some opportunities both ways in that end for sure.
Yeah, and that's a good point to kind of piggyback off that, Coach. Nowadays, the way athletics has changed, and it's that way in softball too, these 4-year institutions are looking for kids that can play. No more, a lot of them are not looking for players they can develop. They want somebody to come in that they can plug in and play immediately because the game has kind of changed. So, they're looking for that. So they welcome y'all to come to their place.
They do. And, it's a little bit, we had some conversations with some players today. The timelines are different. For instance, when I was at Marion, 12, 15 years ago, if we go and we play and we beat a Division I team, a lot of times I might get, 2 or 3 players offered on the spot on the field. It's not that they're any less interested now. The response you get is, we're very interested. We're going to continue to follow, keep us posted. We're going to be there in person. We've heard all those responses. But the reality, going back to some things that I talked about on the show, back during, from the Scenic City League experience this summer in Chattanooga, they're going to have to play a little bit of a waiting game, largely because those guys, especially the La Techs, the Troys of the world, if they have a player or they have a good season, there's a very high likelihood that now the big NIL coffers at the big schools will pull one of their better players, And then, I think Troy had 12 or 13, on their roster go a year ago. I don't think, in years past, you would look at that and immediately point the finger at the coach. I don't think that really is the case at all now. I think it's when, players are getting 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, at kind of the low end of the marketplace for some of the pitchers, they're going to go. And so, what does that mean for our kids? That means that there's going to be some late spots. I talked to one of them today. I said, one of the things I learned last summer is there's a very real possibility, use this time as they're evaluating their rosters for you to evaluate programs, especially as you're getting such an up close and personal look at some of the really good ones that we're taking you to this fall, because there's a real high likelihood when we get to the end of the spring or we get to the summer that somebody's going to call and say, hey, this kid here, we need to bring in. Only this time they're going to bring you in. They're going to tell you, here's the visit and here's the offer. And you may have to make a decision like on the spot or within 24 hours because of the windows that exist with the portal and what they're trying to fill so fast. So that's not a great system, but it is reality now. And we're trying our best to educate our kids on that. There are kids on our roster that have bounced back, that had offers, in front of them. They were pulled. They got shot to somebody else's last minute. I don't even blame coaches as much on that. It's just it's where we are now. You've got you have to throw a lot of lures in the water in a short window. Some will bite, some won't. You make the best decision you can with as much info coming out as you can see. And it's just, it's different. So everybody's trying to adjust, and, hopefully our players are getting a good education. They're certainly seeing, how coaches operate. We've taken some time. We got a chance to sit down with the sport administrator and meet him at Louisiana Tech, Malcolm Butler, who's a great guy, one of the best in the business. Those experiences, getting to see how a coach interacts, getting to see kind of how their players move on and off the field. We try to take with James over at McNeese or Josh at La Tech, we take some time to look at that and go, this is what right looks like. This is where you guys want to go. And so, all of those things help them make a decision, whether they go there or not, at what right looks like. And hopefully, we'll kind of narrow down the picture of what they're trying to do. So all that's part of the process. And fortunately, we're able to get involved in that at a hands-on level where they really get some good information and experience.
Well, Coach, I want to ask you, you were talking about road trips, and you had, one girl that's from Louisiana and two from Texas, and their families come over. Do you make it a point to spend some time with their families in that you don't get to spend a lot of time with them?
I as much as I can within the time parameters, I would tell you I got to talk to each one of them, but I really didn't have much time to sit down in that time frame. Your road windows are really tight on the trip that we had in it. This is a 2-day, what I would call a two-day road trip in reality, because we're just playing the Saturday, Sunday, and then going back. What I'm used to is, you would come in on Thursday, you're playing a Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. Usually one of those days we would give time for the players to, hang out with their families in a typical 3-day road trip. We did that today, just kind of, or this past week, on just a 1-day deal. It was about really kind of a half-day deal where they could go and hang out with them. And it's not that we're trying to be mean, it's just you just run out of time. There were some things that I wanted to see that were kind of sightseeing attractions in a couple of the areas. Didn't have time to do that. You're really trying to hit the main course as best you can, but we did point some things out, and they did get some family time. And I probably didn't get as much time as I wanted to outside of, just keeping a timeline, but it went off real well. The kids behaved well. Parents were great. Our support staff, with Danny and Chris, with police escort and bus driver are awesome. So we just, it was a real good trip, long and tedious in some spurts, but just couldn't ask for a better trip for sure.
Of course, I guess, with the parents involved with your kids, you want them to understand you've got an open door policy that anytime they need something, they can reach out to you, because, kind of you become the father figure for these young ladies. And, sometimes there needs to be a go-between.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with us, with parents, is you're limited, and nowadays this is something that doesn't get taught as much. But we definitely live in a helicopter age. Our parents are pretty good. There are several of them that I know really well, have known for a long time, that I enjoy seeing. I know coaches that don't have the same experience that I'm having right now. And the reason, we try to put some parameters up, not because we're trying to be, jerks to them, but we also have to keep in mind that, in a very short amount of time, these kids are going to be on their own. And I think that's not done enough in higher ed today, not just athletics. We want to keep them, with mom and dad until they're 30. And I don't think that's reality. I don't think we're teaching them the right things. Our parents, I feel like, for the most part that I've dealt with here, are 100% behind that. I think they do a good balance of, being there and seeing them. And also with me, I just really have one rule with those guys, and that's don't talk to me about playing time. And not because I just think it muddies the waters. It doesn't help the program at all when that kind of scenario happens. And so, if they want to, within reason, because, you've got laws on privacy, because we are dealing with adults by law. If there's something that, we need to talk to them about, as far as, their well-being, we greatly appreciate that, and we'll do that. And our parents do a really good job of understanding that. We have a meeting with them at the beginning of the year. So that's always been, with this bunch, pretty good. I feel like that set, and it's like anything else. If those are rules that aren't met, we got to make changes. But we haven't had an issue with that. It has been an issue with kind of our society and our sport in general, but it's been pretty good on our end. And I thought it was really a lot of them that I talked to after the game, and I didn't get to talk long. I think they really enjoyed that trip. A lot of our kids had never been in Louisiana. They'd never had Cajun food. They'd never seen, either Ruston or Lake Charles. So, we try to, do some things that are, if I had more time, there's a lot you could point out in some of those areas. I'm a history guy. I've got one of my kids that likes, is kind of into the Bonnie and Clyde thing. A lot of stuff that Bonnie and Clyde did. Of course, they met their demise about 20 minutes outside of Ruston. I'd love to have shown them that. Don't have time. Pretty windy road. If you've ever been to that site, it hadn't changed a lot since 1934, but it's kind of a cool thing to see. When we were in Marion at the Military Institute, of course, I was there for 6 years. I had to show them, Loveless Hall, and which is now a barracks there, dorms, and the chapel there, which is a chapel and then sort of an auditorium as well. And, that was part of Breckenridge Military Hospital. During the Civil War, it was a hospital for both, Confederate and Union soldiers. We got to see that. I think it's important for these guys when we have time and when we can to see some things that are outside of just softball, because we are getting a college education. I think those things are great. I appreciate the fact that, Dr. Campbell appreciates that on these trips, because, we ate at a pretty nice Cajun restaurant on the way back from Lake Charles. And I think that was good. Just all those are cultural benefits for our kids to kind of see some things that are not just in their backyard, for sure.
Yeah, definitely broaden their horizon. I mean, that's like people will talk about going to New Orleans, and there's a lot of stories about New Orleans. But if you don't understand the history of New Orleans, you don't have an appreciation for it. So, like what you're talking about, these young ladies go down and they experience it, and now they have that in their head, and it's going to make them be curious in other places. They may ask to go to certain places in the future and learn that they do like travel. So, I think that's great for these young ladies.
Yeah, Dr. Campbell's an American Studies guy. He's got a degree in that. I have a degree in that. So that was kind of an intriguing, collaboration possibility when we were talking about doing this, because, and I teach 2 classes of history at Northeast. So there's not enough said, today when we talk about education, we think tech and kind of go in that direction. And, there's nothing wrong with, some field trips, that are kind of an extension of a road trip to broaden horizons. So we try to do that as much as possible. And I think, to a certain degree, we were successful on this one for sure.
Definitely. So, well, I want to get back to softball. You've had a couple of weeks, seen a lot of players play. Player-wise, have you had some young ladies that kind of open your eyes a little bit that you see coming in the future? They're going to help this softball team. Of course, that's what these trips are for. Name some of the ones that you've really been kind of sort of surprised at.
Well, I think, there's a lot of talent, kind of echoing some things we talked about a couple weeks ago. They've continued, the sophomore leadership has been very good. Kylie Weston has played very, very, very well this fall. She, in my mind, she's a legit Division I player. I thought when we played Mississippi State, she was the best center fielder on the field. I felt like Morgan Perkins, especially from a defensive standpoint, was the best shortstop on the field. I thought Marty McCluskey, whether she was playing catcher or third, was in that conversation, even against that team. They played very well. Savannah Cantrell has really come on. She struggled a little bit with speed of the game. She still has her moments, and that's to be expected, learning coming out of high school, but she's done a much better job behind the plate. She's got a lot of power. She had a couple really hard hits against Louisiana Tech the other day. Very pleased with her ability to adjust and stay in the fight. Austin McNeese is learning, some things at third base at a higher level. She's put together some pretty good at bats. In the outfield, both Bree Wilson and Lorelei Sullivan are immensely talented. They can throw, they can run. They can do a lot of things to beat you. They're learning, and playing against this kind of competition has been good for them. They've been able to steal some bases. They've been able to get put in some tight situations at the plate. So all those are good. I thought, particularly Olivia Acuff yesterday played really well. We put her second. She hadn't had a lot of time there. Played really well. She's a kid we had high expectations of coming in here, but we weren't sure how soon that was going to happen. She's just a baller. I mean, gets on the field, very good situational IQ, communicates, loves her teammates, very good values. A lot of these kids on the team, their parents have been very good at what they've done coming here. I would call them throwbacks. They pay attention, they adjust, they respond to criticism when you have to get it better. We just don't have a lot of whining. We don't have a lot of transfer of the blame. Everybody has their good and their bad days, but they're a good group to be around. And, I think when, players today get kind of a bad rap, with everything that's going on in college athletics, that's not here. And that isn't to say we're going to see adversity, but we've kind of gotten a point where we're going to welcome that, I think, as a group. And that really says a lot about, the character of the team, and in the circle, Aaron Harrelson absolutely dominated on, in the closing side yesterday, and particularly, I thought Addie threw well, all week. She's got a couple gears in there that we're going to find. I thought, Skylar kind of had a Jekyll and Hyde deal. I think she was really amped up and nervous against McNeese, and better than her performance indicated that day. She took ownership of that, and she threw about as well as I've seen her throw yesterday against La Tech in relief. We won that game largely because, of kids like Hallie Haynes and Kaylee Warnock and Skylar Branch and Aaron Harrelson, being ready to pitch on the back end. Addie did a good job of keeping us in a fight on the front end, but it was a team effort. Bullpen held. Starter did a good job in Addie's case. And then, defensively, we did a really good job. Like I said, it was 2 or 3 double plays we turned, which is not easy to do against a quick team like that. And, the other piece of it was we had some kids off the bench that are doing jobs that don't really get a lot of, ink, but they're helping us win. Pearl came in, Pearl Bellamy did a really good job, in pinch running detail, scored some runs, took some extra bases. Really pleased with what she did. She did it, she scored her only run on a really well executed double steal out of a first and third against Troy. So I'm pleased with that. And then Sophia Murphy and Sierra Walding have continued to contribute. You know, our bench play in innings 8 through 10 allowed us to score 3 runs, coming in as pinch hitters, pinch runners. And those two had a big deal with that. Briley Weber had her first at bat, which was an RBI walk with the bases loaded. You know, and those 3 runs were the difference in the game yesterday. So all those things are pleasing. And you know, there's a lot of kids, you know, that I can point to, but you know, the reason I name a lot of names is there are 25 kids that I feel like all of them are doing things to contribute to creating value for themselves and creating value for the ball club. That's not really coach speak. I just really believe that in this group. Sometimes it's a bigger role, sometimes not. You know, we had some kids that hadn't thrown a lot. You know, the week before, Cheyenne Parker threw against a really good McNeese team, did a good job. You know, and they're good. You know, so I was pleased with that. So it's given us kind of, you know, we've got some tough decisions to make, but it's not tough in this sense that we just feel like we're going to have a good starter and we're going to have a good next man up if the situation arises there. So those are good things for us to have to worry about. And the kids are making that, you know, very competitive for us, which, you know, I wouldn't have it any other way for sure.
Yeah, well, Coach, you talking about the way the young ladies are acting, in the world the way it is. If young people take accountability, it makes them easy to coach, and that puts you far ahead of the game because they're listening to what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm real pleased. I thought we would have a better response after McNeese than we had that day, but I did not expect the response to be to the extent that it was. And we ran into some adversity. We didn't make a couple plays in an inning with a lead. When Kaylee Warnock came in, I thought she could have gotten out of there a lot faster if we'd been a little bit better defensively. Our players know that. It makes my job easier. So I know that they know there's a little bit of trust being built with us because I don't have to it's not like I'm having to wake them up. They're just making physical mistakes and they need to be reminded that, hey, now is the time to put a foot down. I think that's more of my job if I don't see it happen just immediately than than having to really shake them loose to get that sort of thought process because I think it's there. We had multiple timeouts during the course of the week where something like that happened, and there always was a response immediately. You know, we would get off the field in 2 outs, sometimes in one pitch right after that timeout. That's what you're looking to see as a coach. That's a process that's leading to good results. Olivia Acuff, missed the ball, at second base. We preach, being able to catch the ball and, with top spin at the highest point or lowest point. She goofed on that. The next ball was a really hard ball. She had the backhand. She was there, made the play, did it exactly right. And that, is she's disappointed. I'm disappointed in that moment, but she stayed in the fight and made a play and we got off the field. So the damage wasn't any worse than it was with just a one play. So those are the things that we've got to look at and continually respond and get better in adverse moments. And that's what I'm really the most proud of with our team. And there's lots of those examples throughout the week that I thought we took advantage of for sure.
Yeah, there's one thing that's all the years I played baseball, and of course, watching softball, hitting and pitching is going to be hit or miss sometimes. You don't know what you're going to get. But defense, you can stop the bleeding. One error can lead to another error, but you have to stop the bleeding because a lot of times that can cause a team to really go to pieces.
Yeah, and we would have, the score looked lopsided against McNeese, but we left. We had some uncharacteristic focused mistakes. We did it with a couple different players. We were turning the backside of the double play on the 6-4 feed. We dropped the ball. That happened a couple times. That's not what we do. And I'm not here to relive it or live in, in just, negativity. They know that. I know that. It's been addressed and we moved on. The next day we turned some double plays. That's going to be a staple of what we do. We've got a couple kids that can really do that. They're going to make pitches consistently to get the ball on the ground to the left side, and we're going to be able to spin it. If we turn those, if we don't drop those 2 balls, that's probably 4 runs. The good thing about it too, though, is because of that failure, McNeese responded immediately. So now there's a tangible lesson for our team to see that if you do this, a really good team like we played the other day will respond immediately, not later, not next week, right then. And La Tech did that at times yesterday as well too. The great thing about yesterday was we responded every time they responded. That against a team like that they're a good team. I'm just immensely proud of the effort and the resiliency of our group and the fact that they're valuing that going forward. And we just got to continue to do that and not get complacent. And I think we'll be okay. But it's hard. Every time we get a little bit better and we have more success, you're going to have more and more people shooting at you. And you just have to, push that out and continue to do the things that we've done to get better. And once we do that, the championship's the limit for sure.
Well, Coach, I want to ask you about this, kind of sort of changing off just a little bit. If I'm a recruit or a young lady's watching this and looking, possibly maybe to come to Northeast, what does a typical day look like for the student athlete during the season when you do have practice? What does their entire day look like?
Well, we sometimes will do something in the morning that is either practice or working out. I don't do it as much as some programs do, in that 6 to 7:30 time frame, because I think that sleep has largely been undervalued traditionally in our sport, and that's going to sound to the old school people like, what do you mean? I mean, I was in the Army and you don't sleep, but I don't know that all that's positive. A lot of the research that's coming out now. They need sleep. And I'm not saying where you sit in bed all day and do nothing, but you need to recharge your body. That's what we're doing today. We may or may not do something. I would say it's less of a thing for us, when we're doing it early. And then they usually have class 8 to 12, 2 to 3 days a week. We do our voluntary early work 12 to 1. Typically we'll have practice 1 to 4. And then, and within that time frame, we can usually mix in workouts, because our facility is just so easy to get, so many things done right there because there's just nowhere we have to go. So that helps. Then they've got study hours they have to get. They may be able to squeeze those in during daytime classroom hours or possibly get them later. And that's it. That allows them, some time to manage their day accordingly. I don't think that particular schedule is any different, or wildly different than a lot of programs. We do go, anywhere from 5 to 6 days a week, typically until we get past the end of the fall. And then there are for sure no weekends, where they're having to do anything. The big difference, though, for recruits is go look at the schedule we are playing. Go look at the way we practice, in terms of what is being demanded out of everyone, the improvement of our players. Kylie Weston's a really good example. We didn't play quite as hard a schedule last year as we are this year, but she'll be the first to tell you she didn't have a great fall, especially offensively a year ago. She is really playing well, really playing well. I mean, we hit a ball off the pitcher's knee yesterday. There's another, really hard line out. We get a bunt down, that advances a runner that, was about a step away from being a hit against elite competition. She has not looked overmatched against anybody we've seen. I didn't think, especially with, really any of our hitters, even the ones that came off the bench, when you score 11 runs, I don't care who you're playing. That's pretty good. We did it against some pretty good pitchers, that. Like I said, the Allie Floyd kid, one of the adjustments we made that we've been trying to get right since we played Mississippi State. We had Mississippi State, we had Troy, then we had McNeese, all of whom have ace-type pitchers, and in many cases, a couple times over. And, what we preach about hitting an ace is having to be really relentless on 0-0, trying to get off swings to affect their ability to just go in there and lay stuff in where they can control the sequencing from there. We did an outstanding job of that, yesterday, especially against the Floyd kid who was a 22-game winner a year ago. beat Oklahoma State, beat Auburn. And, we had several hits and RBI opportunities that we converted where we didn't get really 2 pitches deep into an at-bat. We hit the first hard thing out away from the white that we could see, and we hit it hard. So I thought that was a credit. That was in the process adjustment our kids did a good job of. They're still learning and understanding why some of the approaches we're doing and when we're doing them. After she left the game, they had a kid that struggled with his own. We got a lot more passive, which was good because that's what the game told us to do. And we clogged up the bases and we scored 3 runs a different way. So that's what championship teams do. Really proud of the discipline and the awareness and the buy-in of our team to be able to, affect what the pitcher's doing and affect their teammates' ability to get up, turn the lineup over, and keep the line moving to score runs. So all those things are good. Those are little things that, I think that players, that are potentially coming into our program should fall in love with. If you don't fall in love with this isn't, the things that I talked about, this isn't probably the place for you. But, you're not going to get an opportunity to do some of the things I listed, playing just the team down the street and not really pushing yourself. So very pleased with all that from our squad for sure.
Well, Coach, you talk about your practice schedule, you say from 1 to 4. Is it very detailed? Does the players know what you're going to be doing from 1 o'clock to 1:15 and from 1:15 to 1:25? Is it kind of random or is it very detailed in what you're trying to get done?
We meet pre-practice because I don't ever have the same practice in a day. Now, there's things that they're going to see that are routine. Because I do think you've got to have routines, especially, with some of the things we'll do individually, hitting wise, defense wise, base running wise. However, within those routines, I'm also going to tweak things here and there, make an emphasis on, little things here and there so that it doesn't get stale and it doesn't start to look like what I call eyewash, which is kind of a synonym for, to keep it clean on the program, BS. So, we want to, challenge them, make sure they've got a task and purpose and an end state to everything that they're going to do. We do a lot of situational stuff. That's the piece that people, when they come to watch us practice, we've got it down to where in situations, the drill that we run on the back end of practice, not every day, but a lot. Every player, by the time they hit, they base run, they defend. If we go through 3 to 5 of those, they get about 90 situations in that hour period. There's about 12 million possibilities in a game, literally. So, we're trying to make a dent in that 12 million every time we're on the field. So you're starting to see things like that translate into games. We had several, against really good, fast teams, McNeese being one. Morgan Perkins had a ball that she came up on where a runner was running from second with 2 outs. She didn't field it cleanly, turned around, had a full arm fake, back picked her to third base. That's a how to win awareness play. That comes out of situations, that comes out of things that we do. Very pleased to see a freshman do that at this stage of her career. And she's not the only one. We've had a lot of, Olivia Acuff, we had 2 double plays. She's running back on a pop-up, kind of senses the base runners off. Immediately we throw the ball, we got a double play. It wasn't a look around, find her. She instantly saw it, knew where to go, out. I thought our outfield, for the most part, did a pretty good job of limiting, what we call throwing doubles, holding the middle of the field so that, we're not just bombing the ball home and somebody ends up getting the backside double on us for no reason. Did a pretty good job there. There were a couple that we could get better at. McNeese had a really unique challenge in that their 1 and 2 hole were, plus runners really fast. That changes a little bit what we're doing in terms of the throw and where we're going to go in the outfield. I thought we goofed on it the first time, probably due to lack of experience. We talked about it mid-game. Instantly, we did it right the second time. So those are the kind of things that, we've got to continue to do well, in order for our team to improve. And I think we've got the right mindset for that for sure.
Yeah.
Daddy, I gotta go potty.
Okay, hang on 1 second. I'm following double duty here. So yeah, you guys can keep talking while we're doing this. So yeah, but no, those are some of the things that I think are going well, and some things that I think are unique, currently going on for sure.
Yeah, I think, and of course, if you can catch it, that's what I was going to ask you next. Because if you don't have a routine every day, you work on a lot of situational things. And the best baseball coach I ever had, it was constantly situational coaching because it keeps you on your toes all the time because that makes you react constantly. And if you think, a lot of times you're going to think wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we learned, from Clint Myers at Auburn. He had a system where, we'll have a full defense out. We've got a hitter at the plate. Usually we'll start that off with a runner at one. Usually Courtney. Sometimes we'll do it with a live pitcher, but Courtney will be throwing. If the ball's put in play, we play it out. The hitter then returns back to, if we're still going at first base, she'll go to first base as the base runner. The base runner goes to hit. So it kind of goes in a cycle that way. And then once everybody is done with being the hitter and the base runner, we'll move to the next situation, which could be runner at two, could be runner at 1 and 2. Doing that with about 5 different scenarios like that, by the time they base run, hit, and defended, like I said, that's the math component that comes down to 90. A lot of stuff comes out of that. We do it pretty fast in order to do that within, an hour and a half time frame. I think those are, we know, it's a really, precise cuts and relays redirect system we use, which comes into play, especially this time of year, because, you're going to see that with more speed. So things are good, from that standpoint. It allows us to have some things that, are going to challenge us in unique ways that we won't see this year for sure.
Well, I'll ask you one more question. Of course, it's probably good. You probably want to get on out of here. But so far this year, I know you probably had some goals in mind of what you was wanting to see in the fall. Are things going as to plan, or maybe are you ahead of schedule right now? And I know you talked with Jimmy and Courtney, and I'm sure they have a lot of input on that. But y'all like the way things are going?
Yeah, I would say that everything's on track. I don't know that we're ahead. I don't know. I know that we're hitting the benchmarks right now that I have for us. And I feel good about it. I want to continue to do that. But I think that, those items are on schedule, so far. And that has a lot to do with, just the attitude of the players and what we've been able to do there. So, yeah, we're good. So, all those things are really good. And I feel good about kind of where the schedule is at the moment. It's hard to say if, it's tough with freshmen to forecast or kind of be able to, gauge their development in some ways. I wouldn't say that anything really that's happened in terms of their development or even the sophomore development coming back has been wildly surprising. We had pretty high expectations of this group, whether they were a returner or a newcomer coming in, and they've met or exceeded that, I would say, so far. We just need to continue to do the things that we are doing so far and not get complacent and remain healthy. And I need to not, I've got to keep a good pulse on that because we want everybody to finish this job, and so we're maintaining that pretty vigilant. We've been able to, it's nice having 8 pitchers. Addie's taken some innings, but she hasn't taken, greater than about, 35, 40% of the workload. And our bullpen's done a really good job of taking that off of her and also understanding that role is just as important. That allows us not to have to just wear her down. And then on the other side, it's getting some kids some time on the back end in some really tight spots, which I think are really, really valuable to what we're trying to do. So, all those things are good. I feel good about kind of, you're always trying to find ways to, can we use this person this way? Can we get this person a look? We're going to continue to do that. I felt this team kind of works in pieces, like what you're trying to do on paper translates on the field, if that makes sense. So that's been nice. That isn't always the case, but we have some real versatile players that allow us to shake a lot of different things up, get some people some rest, see some different looks. And I don't feel like when we do that we're just like, oh man, there's a big drop off here if this person does it. Everybody's got something they can do to help us, so all that's good. And I feel real good about that for sure.
And of course, playing as many people as you do, that gives you a lot of interchangeable parts, and they're going to be ready on the bench because I don't never know when they're going to go in. Well, Coach, what do you have in store? I'll turn you over to Howie after this. What do you have in store this week? What are the road trips?
Well, this week will be a little simpler. We'll play Sunday at Sanford. We're playing 2 7-inning games. Then the following week, we're still on kind of the gauntlet. I'll probably give them off Monday. Then we'll have a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practice schedule. Friday, we go under the lights to Georgia Tech, which will be obviously challenging. We have a light practice on Saturday. Then we go to Chocolaco on Sunday in Oxford, and we'll play Jacksonville State, which will obviously be challenging. Both of those 2 contests will be 10 innings, kind of like what we did this week. So that's going to be good for our team. Those are obviously good teams, all of them that we're going to see from Sanford to Georgia Tech, Jacksonville State. So all those will definitely challenge our group and make us better. So we're looking forward to that for sure.
All right, Howie.
Coach, we appreciate your time. We're going to let you get off of here and everything because we know you've had a long road trip this past weekend, got another long one coming up this weekend and everything. We appreciate your time. Quick question. This long road trip, I'm going to assume something funny has happened on that road trip that you and the girls will be able to bring up later on. Is there something you can tell us about?
I don't know if there's anything that funny as much as just I really enjoyed the joy they had you could tell they were really proud and happy at the end of the game yesterday, and they were exhausted. That was the other thing. And, that's what'll stick with me, I think, the most. And, the other piece was, I don't know if it's funny or not, it was a good, joyful moment. Briley Weber's birthday, her 19th birthday is today. And we crossed that mark time-wise coming in last night at about midnight. The girls all got together. We were all I think it was within the last 15 minutes of the trip. They sang her happy birthday. That was a cool moment. I'm surprised they did it just in the fact that we were all really tired. But, that was fun. That's something I'll remember as well. So that, a lot of fun on that trip. I'll help you out, babe. I sure will. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Got the 4-year-old. We got to figure out the remote control here.
That's all good. Coach,
but,
we're gonna let you take care of you. Family comes first. So take care of your daughter and we appreciate you. We'll see you in 2 weeks and best of luck on this upcoming road trip.
All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys having me, and we'll talk soon for sure. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate you.
You bet. Yep. Take care.
You too. So that was Northeast coach Joe Guthrie joining us after a long road trip. And Phil, it seems like they had a lot of good stuff to learning experiences for them, and not just on the softball field, but actually life in general, being able to try new food, seeing new places and everything.
Yeah, like he's talking about on the road trip back, it's great bondage for these young people. It's good for them off the field, on the field, because like we talk about, anytime you can broaden a young person's horizon, it's always good, always good.
Absolutely. And we're going to let Coach get out of here. We're going to end the show as well. So, Coach, best of luck. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks, like I said. So, for Phil Harris, I'm Howard Cheney, and our guest tonight was Coach Joe Guthrie, and he said that hopefully next week we can have 2 weeks from now, we can have a couple players on. He was trying to give them as much time off as possible tonight, and not necessarily from softball, but from seeing him as well. I think he may not want to admit it, but I think they may be tired of seeing him too.
Yeah, I think they all did a surprise birthday party tonight with Briley, and I didn't want to get in the way of that. That was team oriented, and they called it, and but we'll get it rolling next time for sure.
Absolutely. So good night, everybody, and thanks for joining us.